Well, today is part 36 of our wild harvest edibles that prepare at the table before me. And just a reminder that as you navigate any health challenge, it's always recommended that you partner with a medical practitioner that shares your philosophy of the care of the human body in disease and in health. And the information shared here is educational in nature and just can be another tool in your wellness toolbox. And if it looks like something that's interesting to you, just be sure to check it out further before implementing any new strategy that would come your direction, and make sure that's going to be a right fit for what your situation is. Thomas Edison said a long time ago that the doctor of the future will give no medicine, but will instruct his patient in the care of the human frame, in diet, and the cause and prevention of disease. And around the same time, or a little bit later here in 1885, in the Testimonies for the Church, Ellen White states that there are many ways of practicing the healing art, but there's only one way that heaven approves. God's remedies are the simple agencies of nature that will not tax or debilitate the system through their powerful properties. Pure air and water, cleanliness, a proper diet, purity of life, and a firm trust in God are remedies for the want of which thousands are dying. And we're seeing that today. Yet these remedies are going out of date because their skillful use requires work that the people do not appreciate. Fresh air, exercise, pure water, and clean, sweet premises are within the reach of all, with but little expense. But drugs are expensive, both in the money they cost and in the effect produced on the system. John states in 3 John 1 and 2 that he prays that above all things that we be prosperous, or that we prosper and be in health, just as our soul prospers. And there is a connection between the soul and the body and the mind and its health. And we are to present ourselves as living sacrifices, holy and acceptable to God. Romans 12, 1 and 2. So tonight we're going to look at a couple different things. We're going to start off looking at a green plant called duckweed. You've probably seen it on ponds around. It turns out that it's actually a fairly beneficial plant, especially on the edible ends of things. We've done a lot of things here recently that have low palatability and edibility and more of a medicinal slant to them, but this has probably a higher palatability, edibility potential to it, although it hasn't really been used extensively in that regard. Some other names, so duckweed is Lemna minor or Wolfia globosa. There's a couple different Wolfia species, but it's all various forms of duckweed, also known as water lens or water lentils. Bay root is another name for it. It's an aquatic plant that grows in fresh water, and it grows very rapidly. It prefers still or slowly moving water, and it's found around the world. So that's kind of good news because you can probably find it almost everywhere. And it grows at the surface or just below the surface. You can see that it's fairly small in the hand that is in the water there on the right. You can see that each leaf is an entire plant and has a single, in fact, the picture here has the double root hair, but there are root hairs in singularity that are sticking down from those leaflets into the water. So that's how they absorb the nutrients from the water. They do have a small flower, but it primarily produces by asexual reproduction by budding. So they're essentially large amounts of it are clones, essentially, because they bud off from one to another and just split. So it can cover large areas rather rapidly. There's some interesting features about it. It's edible and eaten in some parts of the world. Thailand and Laos, Southeast Asia in particular, have been the pioneers in eating duckweed. But it's actually a very excellent source of protein, 30 to 40% by dry weight. And the profile is very close to what the World Health Organization suggests as being a complete protein profile. In fact, it's the only plant protein that has all 9 essential amino acids as a part of it. It actually is a source of vitamin B12 and some other vitamins. It probably isn't enough vitamin B12 to keep you out of a deficiency syndrome, but it can certainly be a source of vitamin B12. It has more protein than soybeans. It can double its biomass in 16 hours. So just think about the doubling time on that. It can grow very rapidly. you want to make sure that you choose it from clean water sources, pure water, because it does have a tendency to be able to bioaccumulate toxins and other impurities in the water that it inhabits. So you want to choose the most pure water that you are able to do that with. Has about 47% fat, and one of those important fats is the omega-3 fatty acids. So this is an excellent source of omega-3s. You see it's in a powder form there on the right. The taste can be mild to bitter depending on the anthocyanin content. So there's different species of the duckweed, and it depends on which species you get, the pigment contents. You can use it in soups, on salads, as a garnish, and sandwiches like sprouts, in smoothies, either as a powder or fresh. You can actually juice it as well. It can be grown outdoors in a pond, a retaining pond, or it can be intensively grown indoors. So a fairly significant biomass can be grown in approximately 1 meter square, 8 trays in a bay that are kind of on a rotating basis. So that could provide someone with adequate protein intake to amend any other plant sources of protein or food sources they may have available. So it's an excellent source of the essential amino acids. So once harvested, it can be stored and refrigerated for up to 3 months. So as a good longevity of storage associated with it. So the trace elements that it will accumulate can be adjusted by the water that it grows in. So you can just so you might even put a little bit of seawater in your fresh water to get the trace elements, the C90 elements that are similar to that which are found in the plasma of the blood. But that being said, it also can accumulate heavy metals and other things that may be toxins in the water that you have around. So you want to choose it from a clean water source and or cultivate it yourself if possible. It's very interesting that there's a partnership between Ajinomoto of Japan and an Israeli company that is making a duckweed formula product called Menkai. That's their brand name. This is the same company that actually makes MSG, monosodium glutamate, which I find very interesting. So they've branched out beyond MSG to other things as well, and this is one of those things. So they're the purveyors of MSG, but they also are getting into the duckweed business. So it grows very rapidly. I said before that it can double its biomass in 16 hours. It's a great source for potential for complete protein, so you can make it into smoothies. And you can see that there are some very large outdoor growing areas. This, I think, plant is actually down in Florida, where they're actually growing it for commercial use. They use it for bioremediation in some places, but they're also growing it and cultivating it for human consumption in addition to that. So some medical usages: the entire plant can be used either dried or fresh. Can be used like a protein powder in smoothies, just general immune enhancement. It's a great source of chlorophyll, but you can also use water or alcohol extractions of the duckweed. And eating it fresh or juicing it has a wide variety of health benefits to it. So it's antibacterial, anti-fungal. It helps to cure fungal and yeast infections, primarily by properly nourishing the body and setting up an environment where these don't flourish. But Staphylococcus won't survive in the presence of duckweed, Streptococcus, Bacillus bacteria, Citrobacter, which is a bacteria that becomes very prevalent in gastrointestinal issues, urinary tract infections, as well as sepsis. So it becomes high prevalence there. And you can see that down below, Freundii, Citrobacter freundii. Neisseria is the promoter of gonorrhea. So you can see its species name is gonorrhea, and it colonizes mucous membranes. So that's where it primarily sets up camp in those situations. And then also can fight candida yeast infections. So it has a kind of a wide suite of things that it can benefit from the bacterial and fungal realm. It's also helpful in people suffering from jaundice and just helpful in a general liver detox. So It can help absorb toxins and aid in the blood purification process and liver purification. So duckweed, again, can accumulate toxins if grown in polluted waters. So you want to make sure that you're choosing a source that is free from pollution. You can see it's used in green smoothies. It can also be used for headaches, various body aches and swelling. Make a poultice out of the crushed plants and apply it to the areas that are painful. So you would do that in a muslin or a sheet packet that you would then crush that duckweed, and you can apply it to the area of concern. So it has a lot of anti-inflammatory properties, relieve swelling of joints and muscles, and can aid in relieving arthritis and gout. So gout is primarily a uric acid crystal lodging in the great toe or other joints, and those crystals causing painful mobility of those joints when they set up camp there. And that typically comes from the consumption of animal products, in particular seafood. Moving away from those things can help to mitigate the fallout of gout. So in Chinese medicine, duckweed has been used as a fever reducer. It can function to induce perspiration, sweating, and can aid in other respiratory situations, as well as urinary tract infections, which we mentioned earlier. Also helping to reduce edema or swelling, and in skin conditions like rashes, eczema, and measles, and also mitigating insect bites. So it can be function as a poultice for insect bites, the juice, or the crushed plant itself. So some harvest tips. You want to avoid, again, harvesting from places where the water might be polluted, and because it can bioaccumulate heavy metals and other toxins. We mentioned before that it's used as a bioremediation tool in areas where there are toxic byproducts. So you want to make sure you're not getting any of that sourced, or not sourcing from those types of places. It's very easy to grow in clean fresh water. If you find a clean source, you could take a few from that clean source, again, realizing that it doubles in 16 hours, doubling time. You could bring those vats to a place where you have a fresh water source, and just can keep changing that water out, and you can grow it and dry it for future use, and then just always leave some behind so it can continue to propagate itself and continue growing. So you could have a readily available full complement essential amino acid profile source for your everyday use by propagating duckweed and using it as an edible food source. It also tends to have a high level of calcium oxalate in it. Cooking would help to mitigate that, but it can aid in kidney stone formation if you consume too much calcium oxalate. Spinach also has calcium oxalate. It would be a little on the difficult side to eat too much spinach, where that calcium oxalate would be a problem. Other plants have higher or lower levels. Sheep sorrel, also another one with high oxalates. Curly dock also has high oxalates, but cooking again can help to neutralize that, as well as just not excessively consuming it. The next thing we'll look at is a lichen. One that we have native here is called lungwort, Loberia pulmonaria. So pulmonaria refers to the fact, actually, it looks very much like lung tissue. So that's what it's referring to in its appearance. Loberia, so it's in like lobes, and pulmonaria refers to the respiratory system. It's a leaf-like looking lichen presentation. It looks a lot like human lung tissue. So it tends to grow in old growth, high moisture hardwood conifer forests, and grows on the ground and on trees. Can grow on rocks as well. It's a mutualistic symbiosis of three different things: an ascomycete fungi, a green algae, and a cyanobacteria. So most lichen are just two things, a fungus and an algae, but this is a cyanobacteria as well as an algae and a fungus. So this is a three-way mutualistic symbiotic relationship. So they're all benefiting each other. So it's a large lichen, about 2 to 6 inches across. It's a very leathery texture, kind of very thick. has a dark green top, light green on the bottom, and it can vary in its coloration depending on the time of year. It's actually a bioindicator in the sense that it won't do well in areas where the air pollution is high, which is true for many lichens. So from a medicinal usage standpoint, the leaf-like part, or the thallus, as it's referred to, is harvested and dried. And it's used in the double extraction tincture form most prevalently. So to make a double extraction, this is the same procedure that we've seen before in conjunction with mushrooms and other lichens like Usnea. But you would take 8+ ounces of lungwort and 24 ounces of 80 to 100 proof alcohol for external applications. You would use vegetable glycerin, 40 to 50% alcohol based. But if you're doing the vegetable glycerin for internal use, use 24 ounces of that. And then 16 ounces of distilled water. So start out by filling a quart canning jar half full of your lungwort, then fill it to 1/2 inch of the top with the alcohol or glycerin if you're doing an internal application or going to be using it internally. Stir it and cap it. You're going to be shaking this every few days for 2 months. So this is a protracted extraction process. You want to strain that alcohol or glycerin out and keep it. And you're going to discard the extracted lungwort. So next you're going to make a decoction of the lungwort. So this is the same recipe you would use for fungi. So either fresh or dried. This is the second half of the process. 16 ounces of water in a glass of ceramic pot. And so a decoction again is extracting it on low heat. So you're going to be putting that lungwort in, covering it and simmering it on low until the water reduces to half of what your original volume was. If it drops too rapidly, just go ahead and add some more so you still get the time. The time is the more important element in the process. So it should take several hours to do that. And then once you have approximately 8 ounces of decoction left, that will be your resultant fluid portion. And that decoction, then you will be mixing with the tincture, either glycerin-based or alcohol-based, depending on the choice that you made above. You would add those two, the decoction and the tincture together. So you would result in a 3-to-1 alcohol or glycerin tincture to the water-based decoction. And then that would store in a shelf-stable way for a long period of time, keeping it in a dark area in a well-sealed bottle. So that's the double extraction method for extracting the beneficial properties from the lungwort lichen. So it's very beneficial in respiratory types of conditions like asthma. So it has some anti-inflammatory and histaminic kinds of properties that are beneficial for asthma and bronchitis, whooping cough, TB or tuberculosis, and laryngitis. Again, we've talked about its natural antibiotic properties, and it can be helpful for bronchial and chest infections. And it functions to help clear mucus. So that's the role of an expectorant. And it's actually, interestingly enough, when it's made into a tea, it has a mucilage content, which is soothing. So the mucilage is made up of polysaccharides. Mucus is actually a polysaccharide too. We don't want to dry up mucus. We want to expel mucus because the mucus is trapping the bacteria, and it's part of our body's mechanism for removing the toxins that the body is trying to throw off. Through exosomal action and other types of ways that the toxins are transported from the body. So it functions in antioxidant and anti-inflammatory and anti-ulcer rows. Kind of the polysaccharides help to protect and heal the body, and functions in a very powerful antioxidant role. So they protect the water from oxygen-free radicals. So oxygen-free radical damage can be the underlying basis of inflammation for cancer and heart disease, and all other inflammatory diseases have most diseases have an underlying inflammatory component to them. So anti-aging, because of the antioxidant component to them, aging is essentially oxidation of tissue. So skin tissue becomes less elastic. We lose resiliency in organ function, hair color can change. Also can be a very good gastric aid. So there's no inflammation or distress that you might find with over-the-counter or non-steroidal inflammatory drugs. So the over-the-counter non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs cause a lot of inflammation, and the lungwort is beneficial for doing those things without having that problem. So it may benefit ulcers as well as things like ulcerative colitis. It actually turns out to be one of the few things that can actually degrade prion proteins from things like Creutzfeldt-Jakob disease, CJD. So lungwort, the fungal ascomycete is the primary agent in degrading the prions, and there are not many things out there that actually are prion degraders. So mad-cow, chronic wasting disease, those are also prion-based diseases, and CJD is one that's found in humans. Again, it has antibacterial roles, and it's effective against a number of different types of bacterial overgrowths like staph, pneumonia, tuberculosis, and salmonella. So that is looking at the lungwort, and we looked also at duckweed as being some promising and beneficial naturally occurring plants that we can access in our environment today. So also helping with healthy digestion. It aids in constipation, stomach pain and diarrhea and bloating, and has mild diuretic properties associated with it, which helps to remove excess fluid. So using it as a tea, again, it has that mucilaginous components that make it soothing to the digestive tract. When you're harvesting it, just keep in mind that lungwort grows very slowly, as most lichens do. So just take what you need. Some areas actually protect the lichen by law, which is interesting. So know your local jurisdictions. It doesn't grow in areas of high pollution just because it can't. So bioindicator species in that regard. Don't take the entire plant. Leave plant attached and behind so that it can continue growing and provide future harvests if needed. Slice the leaves free with a sharp knife and leave that upper tissue attaching to the surface. A little bit goes a long way, so you can make a tincture that's going to last a very long time. One of the best ways to do that is to know where it grows and then come in after a windstorm and just collect it freely after a windstorm from places where it has been blown down. So if you're pregnant or breastfeeding, avoid its use. Safety data hasn't come in on that particular user group at this point, but for making lungwort tea, use 1 tablespoon of dried lungwort lichen, 1 cup of boiling water, and 1 teaspoon of raw honey. Steep that lichen for 15 minutes, and then add the honey and drink it and enjoy it. And use it for a variety of different therapeutic purposes.